So I want you to picture something for me real quick. You're scrolling through TikTok, you come across a video of this guy showing off his cologne collection. And he's saying, this one's a beast fragrance, this one's a compliment puller. And you say to yourself, well, shit, maybe I should buy a cologne or perfume. Then you get overwhelmed by all the choices, and apparently there's different concentrations and flankers, and what does it all mean? Well, just slow down there. That's why I'm here. My name's Shane, and I've been on my fragrance journey for about 2 years now. And right now, I'm going to walk you through my method of understanding and buying the perfect fragrance for you. So, first off, I want to start off with a general overview. There's three different categories of fragrances. And when I say fragrances or colognes in this video, that also applies to perfumes as well. Just being a guy, though, I tend to use cologne, so I'm going to use that word more often. However, fragrances, colognes, perfumes, when you get down to the basics, they're pretty similar. So this advice could go for women as well. But I want to start off with understanding some of the different categories or brands of colognes. Collectors like to call them houses, so I'm probably going to use that term from now on. But just so you know, brands, houses, interchangeable. We usually have three categories, and that's going to be your designer, your niche, and then your clone houses. To start off with the designer category, these are going to be houses like Prada, Gucci, Dior, Chanel, and these are usually large fashion companies that make fragrances sort of as a side hustle. These tend to be the most popular fragrances. Most people, if they are wearing fragrances, are going to be wearing something from a designer house. And they're in the middle of the pack in terms of price point. They could range anywhere from $50 upwards of $300. Next up, we have the niche house category. And these are going to be houses like Le Labo, Amouage, Xerjoff, MFK. Now, niche houses tend to specialize in fragrances and don't really make anything else other than them. Because of this, niche houses tend to have scents that are more artistic, complex. They tend to be of higher quality, and they also make their scents in smaller batches. Now, as you can guess, because of this, niche houses tend to have a higher price point out of the three categories, with numbers usually ranging anywhere from 200 all the way past $800. I personally can't justify that price point for myself, but a lot of people love them. And the last category I'm going to cover is the clone house. Clone houses are going to be things like Latafa, Armaf, Maison Alhambra, and they're going to take extremely heavy inspiration from some of the most popular designer and niche scents on the market and make them at a more affordable price. For example, a bottle of Killian's Angel Share is going to run you about $415. However, a clone of that, such as this, Kismet Magic from Maison Alhambra, only costed me about $30. And usually you can find clones on Amazon anywhere from $15 to $50. That being said, I would only buy dupes and clones on Amazon. I wouldn't buy designer or niche fragrances. This is because a lot of listings on Amazon will be scams. Amazon usually isn't the most trustworthy site for buying actual colognes, perfumes, fragrances. So I just want to give a little disclaimer out there for anyone that's thinking of going on there to look for any. So next I want to talk about notes and the fragrance pyramid, and I'll put up a little example of that on the screen. But usually there's two different types of fragrances when it comes to notes. There's linear fragrances. Now, linear fragrances, the smell is going to be the same pretty much throughout the entire existence of the cologne on your skin. But a majority of fragrances are made in a way that there's three different layers to their scent, and each layer will release at a different time throughout you wearing it. So as you can see at the top of this pyramid though, we have our top notes first. These notes are going to be what you smell from when you first spray on the cologne all the way up to around 30 minutes into wearing it. They tend to be fresher scents like citrus, herbals, aldehydes, and you could think of them as the free bread and butter that you're served at some restaurants. It's meant to grab your attention, but it also leaves you wanting more. So the top notes are then going to gradually fade into the heart or the middle notes. And these notes are going to make up the chunk that lasts from minute 30 all the way to around hour 3 or 4 after applying the scent. These tend to be your florals, spices, and fruits, and you could think of them as a hearty appetizer before the main course. Base notes are going to be the next ones that come up, and they're the longest lasting out of the three, and they kind of sort of set the foundation of the fragrance as a whole. Their notes usually include vanilla, wood, musk, amber, resins, and they'll last anywhere from hour 3 or 4 all the way to the end of the cologne's life cycle. Now that we've covered notes, let's talk about concentration. Now, if you walk into any Sephora or Ulta, you're going to look around and eventually you're going to notice that a lot of these fragrances that seem the same actually have different concentrations. The most common of these are going to be EDT, which is Eau de Toilette, EDP, Eau de Parfum, and then Parfum. These are usually going to denote the concentration of the fragrance oil that is in the bottle. And on average, the higher concentration of fragrance oil that you have in the bottle, the longer that your fragrance is going to last on your skin. So, first up is the EDT concentration. And these tend to be the least expensive out of the three because they have the lowest concentration of fragrance oil in them. They tend to be lighter, fresher, and stick around for the shortest amount of time. That being said, none of this is hard and fast rules. They're just general trends that you see throughout the market. Certain brands' EDTs will actually last longer than other brands' EDPs. So you can take all of this with a grain of salt. EDTs also tend to project more off of your skin than the other concentrations. This is because they have a higher alcohol concentration. So usually fragrances are made with fragrance oil and alcohol. So the lower concentration of fragrance oil you have means that you have a higher concentration of alcohol. Alcohol is what lifts the scent off of your skin and then projects it into the air. And this is because alcohol has a pretty low boiling point. So when it comes in contact with your skin, it warms up, vaporizes, and then it's going to cling onto the scent molecules and bring them with it. EDP is the next one that's up, and they're kind of the middle of the road when it comes to fragrance concentrations. They're usually pretty strong and long lasting. I can get anywhere from 5 to 10 hours with these, and a lot of fall and winter fragrances tend to use this concentration. Parfum is the next one up, and this is going to be the highest oil concentration. And also, these tend to be the most expensive ones just because you have more oil in the bottle than the EDT or the EDP versions. And a lot of people wear this in the wintertime for special occasions or date nights. And you don't need to apply as much as the EDT or the EDP just because it is a higher concentration. Now, these could last anywhere from 6 to 12 plus hours. I personally don't have any parfum concentrations yet. I just haven't really seen a need to have any, but each person's different. On a side note, though, you might think that each of these concentrations would smell the same if it's for the same cologne, but it doesn't always work that way. A lot of houses will change up the notes that they use in each concentration. So then you can have the same cologne at different concentrations having a little bit of a different scent profile to each one. So now that you know more about colognes and perfumes and fragrances as a whole, we can start to talk about my method of how I go about buying these fragrances. So the first thing that I do is something that you've already done. So good job on that. But I'll go into YouTube and I'll just type in the search bar something to do with colognes or fragrances. And there's a lot of videos out there, and this is how I got started, of people ranking their top 10 fragrances of all time for the winter, for date nights, special occasions, summer, anything you could think of. And I'll watch some of these videos and I'll make a mental note of which ones kind of stuck out to me and I'll put them on a list. So the next thing that I do is I go to this really useful site called Fragrantica. Now I'm going to put this up on the screen. Now Fragrantica is cool because it's a forum where people can rate and leave reviews on different fragrances. So you can look up in the top search bar any fragrance you want and it's going to pop up with a picture of it and then it's going to show how people rate it out of 5 stars. It'll show what type of season that people think it works best in. It'll give you a note breakdown of what exactly is in the fragrance oil. And if you scroll down, you can see how people rate its projection, how long it lasts, and whether or not they think it's worth the price point. I want to touch on seasons real quick though. So realistically, you can wear whatever fragrance you want whenever you want. It's totally up to you. However, in my mind, certain scents pair better with certain seasons and remind me of certain seasons. Take, for example, this bottle of Maison Margiela Replica Jazz Club. Now it's going to have notes of vanilla, tobacco, rum, and in my mind, these notes kind of remind me more of the wintertime. Gives more of a cozy feeling. They're a bit stronger, something that would be good for a date night. And because of this, I wouldn't want to wear it in the summer. The summer reminds me more of citrus, marine smells, which would be closer to this, which is Versace Dill and Blue. Also, fall and winter leaning colognes tend to be stronger. So if you put too much on during the spring or the summer, you could risk choking people out. On the flip side, spring and summer scents tend to not be as strong. So if you're putting them on during the winter, they might not be able to cut through the cold air as well and wouldn't last as long. All in all, you can wear whatever you like, whatever makes you happy. However, I would just be cognizant to vary the number of sprays that you're using depending on the season. For example, if it's wintertime and I'm wearing something that would usually be considered a spring summer scent, I might put on a couple more sprays just so it does cut through the cold air a little bit more and people can smell it. On the flip side, if I'm wearing a winter fall scent during the summer or the spring, I'm gonna do a couple less sprays than I normally would just because I know it's gonna be stronger and project more off my skin due to the hot weather. Anyways, now that you've watched a couple videos, you've gone on Fragrantica, and you have a couple colognes in mind, you can now head to a store such as Sephora or Ulta. And now that we're at one of those stores, you're going to want to find some of the colognes on your list. And next to those colognes, there's going to be a little bucket of tester strips. And what you do is you take one of these tester strips, and then you take the cologne that you're interested in and you spray it on the end of that strip. This allows you to smell the fragrance before you commit to putting it on your skin. That being said, a big mistake that I see a lot of people do is they'll grab a couple different colognes, couple different tester strips, they'll spray them on, smell them, and they'll be like, "Oh, I like this one the best. I'm going to buy it now." Please do not do that. Like I mentioned earlier, what you smell for the first 20-ish minutes is going to be the top notes. These are the notes that last the shortest amount of time. So if you spray something off a tester strip, smell it, and then go and buy it, you don't know what the middle and base notes smell like. So you could go home, put it on your skin, wear it, and then realize, oh, I actually hate the middle and base notes. This is horrible. And then you've just wasted money on a cologne that you don't actually like. So what I'll do to avoid this is I'll pick my top two fragrances for that day, and I'll put the first one on my left wrist, and I'll put the second one on my right wrist. So this is important for two reasons. One is that everyone's skin chemistry smells a little bit different. The same fragrance on one person might smell different on another person. So you can never tell how a fragrance is going to smell on you just off the tester strip and a piece of paper. Two is that putting the fragrance on your wrists allows you to periodically smell it throughout the day so you can get a better sense of how it smells throughout the heart notes and the base notes. That way you know that you like each layer of that pyramid as a whole and not just the top notes. Side note, my lighting didn't want to behave, so I had to swap it out. We'll see if this changes anything. So I'll personally repeat this process a couple different times with a couple different fragrances, using the same technique and matching the two colognes against each other. I'm then going to kind of treat it like a March Madness bracket where I'll have the winners from each round compete with each other in the next round all the way until I have the championships and then my final victor. This is why it takes me around 2 to 3 months to decide on my next cologne purchase. Now, to some people, this might be a little bit extra, but you have to remember, you're making a purchase that could be anywhere between 100 to upwards of $500. And I personally would want to make sure that I'm 100% certain that this is the best cologne for me and that I'm in love with it before spending my money. At the end of the day, though, the way you go about purchasing your colognes or perfumes is totally up to you. Different things work for different people, and you don't have to use everything that I mentioned in this video. But I hope that at least some of these tips and information will help you out in buying a cologne or perfume. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.